Hare Krishna. Okay, sounds good. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Gauravani Pracharine Nitai Go Premanandi Vadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Sundari Pascharine. Nisha, Ekadashi for us is tomorrow, but for you it's today. She said, wonderful Ekadashi Kirtan. It's Ekadashi in India. But for us tomorrow, right?
You say it's today here?
Tomorrow. Today in India. You can follow today if you want, but you have to follow tomorrow also. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanam Janashalakaya Chaksurvamilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangulangayate Giri Akripatamaham Vande Sri Guru Dinatarinam Manchakapatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, I need some guidance about what you'd like to discuss tonight. Or if you have some questions. Or you want to leave it to me.
I have one question. It's regarding the preaching field, basically. When you, basically I'm going to talk about something that I've heard. That, they say the Pamvesha Purana.
Which Purana?
The Pamvesha Purana. I know that in
Pavishya Purana.
I know that we have not really studied in this that Purana, but I'm hearing from some parts of the ISKCON that the British, when they came, they faked the story about Jesus' prediction.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
Well,
I mean, with other scriptures also, did they try to fix some things?
the idea is that Christians wanted to validate Jesus within the Vedic line. So some people say they placed verses in Puranas about Jesus to show the importance of Jesus and therefore promote Christianity. So I don't know if that's exactly true, but certainly they were promoting Christianity, and we certainly, considering everything else they've done, that would not be beyond what they would do. But, Prabhupada never got into it, and Prabhupada just glorified Jesus for his tolerance and his forgiveness and his preaching and who he was. And I think it was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta who said he was Shaktavesha Avatar, who had descended from Brahmaloka. That's what I remember. But Prabhupada always glorified and appreciated him as a great preacher and great devotee. And you can see that also, although Christianity has had 2,000 years to kind of get watered down, but still people think of Jesus, they become purified. They pray to Jesus, they become purified. Something is there. Something's happening. People's lives change. Well, when they become Christians, people who are very low, they get picked up, and prayer is there, glorification is there, hearing is there. You look at Catholicism; it's got many elements, the same elements of bhakti. But whether or not they put that in doesn't really matter. Doesn't change the situation. And the interesting thing also is when Prabhupada spoke to Christians, he didn't debate theology. He just stuck on the don't eat meat. And he felt that if they don't get that, there's really nothing else to talk about. He didn't feel that. You'll see in the conversations with Christians, he doesn't really get into, other ideas or what he felt were misconceptions in the Bible. He just says, you should stop doing this. And then one time, the devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, if someone is a real Christian, what would that look like? What would they do? And Prabhupada said they do the same thing we do. They'd follow the four regular principles. They could chant the name of Jesus, but basically it would look like us, hearing, chanting, and not being, not committing sinful activity. And it's so interesting that the concept of being forgiven for sin, which is okay, we also have that concept, but repeatedly being forgiven is considered the top offense to the holy name. So you take a principle which is mercy. Okay, you've committed sin, perhaps unknowingly or due to weakness, apichet suduracharo. If you get up back on your feet with determination to serve, you're forgiven, we'll consider you a devotee, even a saint. But then to continually do that, which some sects of Christianity have evolved to that, unlimited repentance, unlimited forgiveness. And ironically, we say that's the greatest offense to the holy name, to continue to sin with the idea that you'll be forgiven. Because if I have a religious system where I can be forgiven, and I know it, so, if I kind of slip into the pub and blow it one night, in the back of my mind I'm thinking, it's not so bad because I'll be forgiven. So in a sense, it's good not to be forgiven unlimitedly, because that chastens you. But if you know you're going to be forgiven unlimitedly, where's the impetus? A really strong impetus. For some people, it's not just going to come from knowing that if I'm not sinful, I'll please God. They need something like, if you commit this sin, there is going to be karma, and He's not going to forgive you. And then Prabhupada said something interesting. He said, if you have the idea that, well, it's not so bad because I'll be forgiven, he said, that idea is actually worse than the sin you're going to commit. So if you're going to commit a sin, it's better just commit it and say, Krishna, I committed the sin and I'll have to suffer, than say, Krishna, I've committed the sin, but tomorrow morning I'll chant Hare Krishna, and so you're going to absolve me of the effects of that sin. So that's worse than the sin. So better just do the sin and don't ask for it. If you're going to continually sin, don't commit sin on the strength of the holy name or the strength of a religious practice, because that's more sinful. It's quite interesting, when you look at it, because many sects of Christianity seem to be based on this idea, which we can consider more sinful than the sin itself. I find that quite interesting, what's going on in Kali Yuga with religion. And also, just the icing on the cake is they think we're of the devil. The ones who aren't doing the sin are of the devil, and the ones who are not. That's like double paradox. Yes?
As you say, Srila Prabhupada would always point out to Christians, thou shalt not kill.
Yes.
But it's very difficult to prove vegetarianism from the Bible, because Jesus apparently fed 5,000 people with loaves and fishes.
Yeah.
He brought his disciples out on the boat when they couldn't catch any fish. And when he came out with them, they got loads of fish. It's kind of what's going on with it.
But weren't all the early apostles vegetarians? I was told they were. And if that's true, we would have to ask why. Does anybody know?
I just reading in the internet about that, because some people from the churches were coming to my house and we just discussed a lot about the vegetarian. And in the language what they translate, fish, it's have two meaning, hummus and fish. And they eat bread with hummus, not with the fish. That's how they explain as well. It wasn't like Krishna, the Jesus feeding by the fish.
But did he not go out on the boat fishing?
I don't know. They explain as well about the fishing is both secret kind of name. Go to fishing, but it's not was fishing originally. It was explained and showed the spelling how this kind of coming from. It was really interesting. I just was as well kind of wondering about that question.
You know what's interesting also, you have the Seventh-day Adventists. So Seventh-day Adventists, as far as I understand, they're fairly mainstream Christians, but they're vegetarian. So they obviously are basing it on the Bible. So...
But then you also have what seem to be very elevated, saintly personalities.
But were they eating meat? Well, that's another thing.
It seemed like they were in a lot of cases. They're very austere, extremely austere.
We should find out.
Well, there is that quote in the Bible where Jesus is reported to have said to the disciples, "Now I'll make you fishers of men." So obviously, the engagement in fishing or some activity, and I don't think you were out at the seaside looking for hummus. But then we also have similarities. There's there's lots of Vaishnavas or purported proud Vaishnavas in Bengal area, and they fish. And Lord Chaitanya was fished out of the sea by one Prabhu. So it's not that fishing hasn't taken place, but it's actually, if you can see the moral of the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, and apply that to your everyday for your sustenance. And if they can see that, maybe it's just a different level of, realization, because Pandavas ate meat, Bhima ate meat, So, the thing about Urvis is that there was rules and regulations even for people who knew Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they were Kshatriyas, they killed. So, I think it's just really about the realization of if you actually elevate beyond that level of existence to actually a self-realized existence. Because certainly there has been animal killing all through the Vedas also.
But what's interesting is that's the one point Prabhupada talks about.
It is,
And he
and
talks to
again
Krishna.
and again and again.
So he was really upset about it, and he, at least, this point was brought up to Prabhupada, what about the fish? And they said Jesus ate fish, and Prabhupada said, he can do whatever he wants, but you have to do what he tells you to do.
But he fed 5,000 people, obviously.
Apparently, yeah. But, be that as it may, that was Prabhupada's, he really felt that was a misunderstanding. He really...
I think the issue is the slaughterhouses. That's what Prabhupada was mainly attacking. The slaughterhouses.
That also, he talked about slaughterhouse, but he also did talk about meat eating in general. And when he was in Mexico, then he told the priest you should stop the bullfighting. He thought that was extremely sinful. And the priest they were very embarrassed. I don't know if they go to bullfights or whatever, but they didn't respond positively.
When Prabhupada went to visit Mukunda Maharaj in the early days, the first days, he went into Mukunda's place and there was a picture of a bullfighter on the wall. Prabhupada said, "This is not nice, take it down." Mukunda Maharaj just realised, what's that doing there?
It's interesting as well that you were saying that you heard that it was said that Lord Jesus descended from Brahmaloka. Did Prabhupada say that?
I believe it was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta.
Oh, because I remember as well that through Crown Swami he told us one time that he asked Prabhupada about Jesus, and he said as well that he has a separate planet, and that his followers go to that planet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think it's also, though, what about you're saying about the fishes and the loaves. Srila Prabhu has, in one of his lectures, he says that how they choose what's real and what was not real for the likes of the Bible and which verses went in is also a very flawed system. That they had everyone in a room and they had a red stone, a white stone and a black stone, and they quoted all the different verses of the Bible, and any of the prophecies that they thought were true, they put in a white stone. Any that they thought were false, they put in a black stone. Any that they were a bit shaky on, they put in a red stone. So they had them all in a room like this, and if the majority thought, well, that must be true, then they went with it. And if they thought, oh, it's a bit shaky, too many red stones in there, they disregarded it. So what went in and what didn't go in was based on people. It wasn't based on fact, per se.
There's also another point that Prabhupada made, which is, I would support this, that at one morning walk they were talking about the Bible, and he said it's not transcendental because the people who wrote it are not transcendental. He said they're manufacturing. And, if you look at it just from a historical level, the people that were with Jesus weren't the ones that were writing the Bible. So, you're...
So the thing is that, actually Prabhupada he never thought it was good for devotees to preach to Christians on the basis of the Bible.
Yeah.
He didn't think that was a good idea. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says the Christians of the Milechas and the scriptures of the Milechas and the Yavanas are three: the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran.
Yeah. So Malecha and Yavana, in a general sense, means outside Vedic culture. So those are scriptures for people who don't. And outside Vedic culture means outside Varnashram Dharma. So if you're outside Varnashram Dharma, you're a Malecha or Yavana. And in Bhagavatam there's a verse, and I believe the Yavanas were the Turks and the Malechas were the Greeks. It's a word-for-word translation. Yavana, Turks, Malecha, Greek. So it's used, so that may be the races that fled India and gave up the Varnashram Dharma. So that's a good way of seeing it. It's scriptures for people who don't follow Vedic principles, therefore mediating and other sinful activities were acceptable. And, at the same time, Prabhupada appreciated Jesus and the purity of many of his teachings, or at least the ones that didn't get too much watered down. He appreciated that purity. But definitely he was against the mediating.
Isn't it also that in the Bible, specifically in the Old Testament, it's like worship in the mode of ignorance. It's actually, it's tamaguna, because there was sacrifice and animal sacrifice there. And we see the same in the Hindu religion or sect. You see Kali worship and animal sacrifice. So it's tamaguna.
Yeah.
And the reason that possibly we still have meat eating in those Christian-based religions is, first of all, there was a panel document, it was a compendium of people's opinions, and it wasn't like we don't have a bona fide succession when it came down, but also because it's governed by the mode of ignorance, and that if you have intoxication and if you have animal slaughter and sacrifice in there, the process for those is a very slow process. Hence, they may go to a planet where Jesus is, similar to how somebody's in demigod worship may elevate to that planet, but they may again have to take rebirth.
But the interesting thing, like the question you're asking, is that there's a lot of apparently very religious or saintly people, and they're also eating meat, which I agree with, at least externally. But then you could make the argument, how can a person eat meat who's saintly? Because that disqualifies it seems. But I understand your point. In many other ways, they seem saintly. But then, in the Gita, Krishna is saying, you take birth according to the modes that you're in. So it's not just that you believe something and you'll go to a higher planet, but you've created karma. And you're existing within a particular mode, so meat eating, we know, as Prabhupada says in the Gita, it's the grossest form of the mode of ignorance. So how can you go up if you're eating meat?
It seems like some of these practitioners in Christianity are so intense in their practice. And they're not actually fanatics. They're serious. If they actually took up Krishna consciousness, they'd be chanting the Hare Krishna mantra day and night.
Yeah.
And they'd be extremely, they wouldn't oversleep or anything. They'd be completely celibate, all these things. Yeah. And yet they're eating meat. Maybe it could be, Abhichet Sudarachara or something at some point. They'll get the realization they shouldn't be doing this, and then they're really going to
You know, Prabhupada said something amazing. I don't know if you're aware of this. 1972, he wrote a letter to the temple president of the temple that I was in. And he said, he predicted by around the year 2000, Christianity would be finished. But he said, if our movement continues to grow at the rate it's growing now, people will completely lose faith in Christianity because we will be giving the real thing. Isn't that interesting? That it should, in other words, if it kept going after Prabhupada left at the same pace, Prabhupada felt that nobody would accept Christianity because the world would now understand spirituality from us, and they would see what was true, and they would.
And it seeps in gradually into the mass consciousness.
Yeah.
Actually, Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
You know, with the book distribution and preaching, it actually goes into the psyche of the population.
Did you ever see that article? I think it was in. I don't know what magazine it was in. It could have been in Newsweek. And the title of the article is "We've All Become Hare Krishna." Did you any of you see that article or hear about it?
Heard of it, yeah.
When we were in London, we were doing one Prabhupada marathon. It was actually Christmas marathon. And in the middle of the Christmas marathon, Mahavishnu Swami went into one of those newsagents to buy some milk or something. He was just staying at his mother's house, and sometimes he'd go for 2 days when she was quite ill, and he'd distribute books around the neighbourhood, and he was really firing up the devotees like that. He was coming back and explaining he had met his neighbours and sold books and things like that. But anyway, he went into this newsagent, and for some reason he said, it's just Krishna's arrangement, he just glanced over to the side at this section with all these cards, you know, like reading cards, and there was a picture of this father, and he had signs of self-realization. It was a Christmas card, and it was at the front of the pack. It was sold in a pack of about 8 or 10, and this father has the signs of self-realization in his hand. Maharaj passed it around in the class the next day, bought it, and he has it in his hand, and he's all shaved up, the father, and he's got a sika, and he's trying to sneak it into the stocking, and the wife is saying, I just don't think Harold is going to go for this. You know, and he said, just see, the Christmas marathon has been accepted as part of Christmas.
Wow.
And he was saying there's only a handful of us here doing it, but just see the artists and then everyone who was involved in compiling this. So he said we should go in and buy lots of these cards, but then we were thinking we could spend a fortune on these cards, we'd have to try the other 7, and that it was copyright things, you know, could we copy it, but it was just Krishna telling us, you know, there was a handful of us going out, but it had become bona fide.
You know, there's those purports where Prabhupada talks about when people do demoniac activities, they disturb the saner section of society. You ever read those purports? You know, it makes it unlivable for the saner section of society. And Prabhupada felt or understood that the average person is innocent, and when given the truth, they would accept it. And therefore, he felt that if we just continue spreading Krishna consciousness, at some point, sane people would see, and insane people wouldn't, or however you want to call them. But he had a lot of faith that if we were pure and we spread Krishna consciousness, sane and intelligent people would see, okay, this is it. In the 90s, maybe the late 80s, no. It had to be the mid 80s. I don't know if you're aware of this. Well, some of you are because you were around at that time. But after Prabhupada left, it wasn't that there was trouble right away. Things were actually getting better. At least externally, things were expanding. For about 3 years, book distribution increased. Making of devotees increased. Everything was expanding. So after 3 or 4 years, the GBC had a meeting, and they made a prediction that by the year 2000, our movement would take over the world. And that was a serious prediction. They actually believed it. No. So you might say, that was really delusional. But that's how Prabhupada saw And that's how we believed, because he saw that could actually happen if it continued, because it was expanding so quickly. So we got diverted on the way, but there was that mood that this movement could do that. And that's what motivated us so much. You know, we weren't just out on the street selling books. Selling books was externally what we were doing, but internally we were going to be changing the world. That's what we thought, and that's what was empowering us. Not that I sold 100 Bhagavad Gitas, that's nice, but that this is going to change the world. And I'm one person doing this historical event, and it was just amazingly inspiring to think like that.
Where did it go skew-ways then? Where did we go skew-ways then if it hasn't happened?
We lost, I think, 7 of the original 11 within those right after that meeting, pretty much in the next few years. We lost a lot of them. And then one of the side effects of losing them, which I saw, was your spiritual master might have been fine, but the one in the next zone wasn't, and the one in that zone wasn't, and the one overseas wasn't. And so you start doubting your own guru, because there was just a break in trust and faith. So some devotees whose gurus were not deviating, were strict, their disciples were shaken by the fact that other gurus were leaving, and will my guru be next, and is he a pure devotee? So there were doubts and questions, what is a pure devotee, is he? So there was a break in faith, and then obviously a loss in enthusiasm. You know, I was just thinking the other day about inspiration and the importance of inspiration. And one of the things that happen when people are inspired is they achieve things and they don't even need the qualification. It's just, we're going to do this. And because they're so inspired, they figure out how to do it, or Krishna sends somebody to do it. It just happens. Yeah. So you look at all these like buildings and all these projects all over ISKCON that were developed during Prabhupada's time. Those were developed by 20 devotees who were 4 years in the movement, 24 years old, and just incredibly inspired to get all these castles all over Europe and just kind of inundate Europe with Krishna consciousness. And, you know, don't really know how to do accounting, don't know how to do purchasing, don't know how to do business, don't know how to do so many things, but just somehow or other do it because we're inspired. So when you lose inspiration, you can't do it by material qualification alone, because now, obviously, we're more materially qualified. Just life experience we have. From that time, we have another 35 years of life experience, or 40 years from the time Prabhupada left. But without inspiration, we can't do what we did when we were devotees for 2 or 3 years, who had tremendous inspiration. We're more mature, so we can create a more mature movement, but the rate at which we expanded can only happen when there's inspiration. And when there's inspiration, what happened? People were willing to sacrifice. They said, okay, I'll sacrifice my career, I'll be a brahmachari, I'll do this. So, you know, that's what was happening. You know, in America, during the time of the Radha Damodar party, they had 6 buses, and each bus had 1, 2, or 3 satellite vans. So they're like, this party was going all over America, and in every major airport in America, there were book distributors. I was in Los Angeles. We had 20 book distributors at the LA airport, because that's all it could hold. But we had more book distributors. So we had more book distributors, so we had to have two shifts. So we had the 9 to 3 shift and the 3 to 9 shifts. So we had 20 devotees go out. At 3 o'clock, another 20 go out. 7 days a week. And pretty much all the major airports in America were covered like that. So we were inundating America, and there was this huge backlash that we're brainwashing, taking us to court, and Prabhupada was like, yes, they're feeling the heat, they're feeling the weight, this is good. Take it to court, fight it. So, when you have that level of, now it's like, say things are different, people don't want to surrender, maybe it's not a good idea they fully surrender, move in temples, but I think one thing was that inspiration was so high then that people just did it.
So is that inspiration dependent on one charismatic personality, or can it be just
Well,
a cooperative kind of?
it's not dependent, it's just natural in that situation, it would be that way. And, if you break your leg, it may take a long time to heal, so we're recuperating. And I think, a lot of people are concerned about repeating the future because it went well for a while and then it crashed. And a lot of people are thinking, well, we don't want to reproduce it. But there may be a little throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Well, one thing is that, there was inspiration, but it was just interesting when you were saying that when people see that we're sane, they will take Krishna consciousness, so we have to become sane. Not just inspired, but sane.
Insanely
Because you can be
inspired.
inspired and maybe not so sane.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's why I was saying in retrospect we see the immaturity. So if you can combine the inspiration and maturity and the foresight, then we have something good. And any community that's struggling, there may be many reasons, but usually one of the fundamental reasons is lack of inspiration. It's not enough people to do it, nobody wants to do this. There's some lack of inspiration. So if we raise the level of inspiration, there's more dedication. Then manage it maturely, then it'll work. Yes?
People need hope as well. They need hope that what they're working towards is something better.
Yeah, and I think that would also require trust in leadership, in their vision, in their stability. And when Prabhupada was here, we didn't have 4 other Hare Krishna movements around competing with us. Neither we had so many spiritual movements competing with us. So that made it easier. And the interesting thing, when Prabhupada was here, controversies only lasted about 10 days. They only lasted long enough to get the letter to Prabhupada and then get the answer back. We have controversies that have been going on for 20 years that aren't resolved, that may never be resolved, and Prabhupada will resolve them with one letter. So that helped a lot. We all had our own ideas and opinions.
It definitely seems to be, where you have a situation where you have a leader and he has followers.
Yes.
So Prabhupada said, a leader is a person that when he gives an instruction, it's followed. That's a leader.
Yeah.
And if somebody thinks he's a leader, he gives an instruction and it's not followed, he's not a leader.
Well, also the thing is that Prabhupada really, really, really gave power to the temple president. He really pushed that. So it wasn't always that leader was the most qualified of all the devotees, or really that qualified as a leader, but there had to be a structure, and that's the structure Prabhupada wanted. And so during Prabhupada's time, it was to be temple president was, I don't want to say enjoyable, but for lack of a better word, a lot of devotees wanted to be temple president because there was so much cooperation, because Prabhupada had created that mood, work with the temple president, cooperate, do what he says. So it was if you were a manager, it was great because you had a whole troop of people who were ready to work for you and do what you wanted. And now the leaders have a harder time because they have to earn that. Where Prabhupada kind of gave it to them. Now we have to step up and earn it in the wake of perhaps a former leader who didn't do so well, and now people are dubious about leaders. And so it's a different environment. And so sometimes it takes years and years and years of a person acting as a leader before people trust them. And I've had that experience. I was a president of a temple, and then I came back 10 years later, and there were problems, and they said, "Would you be president?" And I said, "Okay." And then all the people that asked me didn't come forward. And I said, why? He said, well, we want to see if you're going to stay first. So they trusted me before, but now in the wake of everything that happened, they didn't trust me as much. So
previously the leader would be there and everyone would just sort of do what the leader said.
Yeah.
Now everyone's waiting to see what the leader's doing.
Yeah. And we would do it because Prabhupada, sometimes somebody would ask Prabhupada, how do you know if I'm pleasing you? And he said, well, if you follow the temple president, you're pleasing me. You follow my authority. Or I believe once he said, well, I asked the temple president. And he's pleased, I'm pleased. Because well, if you're around the world, how do I know I'm pleasing you? How do you know my service is pleasing you? He said, I asked the temple president. So it was, and when there was a loss of faith, a lot of people didn't want to be temple president because of that lack of trust.
There's also an accountability structure, like if something was going on, as you said, 10 days that we saw it because Prabhupada was the central temple. And now, like where is the accountability? People will follow a leader who can lead, but they won't follow blindly because their age profile, even in this chapter, is much older. They won't follow blindly, and they won't follow where there's no accountability. So, it's hand in hand. You were saying this morning that the balance is there, but also the balance is there because you have inspiration, but along with that comes enthusiasm. Lose the inspiration, you lose your enthusiasm. And a friend of ours years ago here on Gabriel, when we were in class, he was saying that losing enthusiasm is like taking a plug and pulling and draining the lake out there. But trying to fill it back up with a teaspoon takes an awful long time. So that's the analogy. You lose the inspiration. To get that enthusiasm back is very difficult. But here in ISKCON, in the structure that we have these days, I don't feel that we have those accountability structures because it's kind of like it can go this way. It's like snakes and ladders a little bit. And so the trust is really damaged from that because people do step up to the mark and they get knocked down. So eventually they have to become independently reliant on Krishna, and then that defies the whole concept of having a society.
Well, if the trust is weakened, then you have huge problems. And you also have the other side is you have accountability, but you also have a temple president who wants to exhibit some individuality. Okay, I'm going to be the president, these are my ideas. And some individuals are very, very willing to work with others and gather their ideas and put it into action. And some people are inspired by their own ideas. And there's a lack, it's not like we have a long line of people. I want to be temple president. It's more like, if we can get someone to do it, we're very happy and we're willing to work on his terms, so because he doesn't do it, then who's going to do it? So when I remember after Prabhupada left, or even during Prabhupada's time, the GBC was more like a representative of the leaders of all the temples than an independent temple. And the temple presidents, they worked very closely with the GBC, and their leaders. So there was independence, but we were working closely together. And so GBC, when he went to the GBC meeting, he had spoken to all his leaders, and he knew the issues that were coming up, and he knew what they thought, which is a different paradigm, right? So I think that's a great paradigm. But you have to have the right people in the right mood to do that. And you don't have a lot of choices now, so. But, like I was saying last night, if you delineate how you'd like it to be, then you can work on it. At least you know what you're working towards, right? And as I was saying last night, that's a problem when you don't know what you're working towards. Because it's not clear, so nobody knows what we're supposed to do or how we're supposed to do it. There is a book on culture change that I read part of it, and the main premise of the book is you can't change culture without accountability. That's first, that's number one. What everybody agrees to do, everyone has to be accountable to do, otherwise it won't happen. So they just stressed accountability again and again and again. And there's not a high level of accountability necessarily, because you have to have a standard to be accountable to in the first place. You have, I know there's a lot of leaders. It's like, this is the best I can do. If you don't like it, I'm fine to step down. No, we need you to be accountable to this and that. Well, I can't be. I'm not good at that, or I don't want to be, or whatever. And then we don't have anybody else. And that goes all the way up to the GBC,
So then is it because we're too insulated and we're afraid to actually take training in ISKCON? Because management is a skill that can be learned.
Yeah. Well, they're doing.
Like any other skill. We train brahmacharis and Sankirtan devotees go out giving books, but we seem to have a weaker infrastructure for training people to inspire those or to actually manage those.
Well, that's been recognized now. But some people may not want to be trained. That's, but there is training now, the GBC college.
But that's by invitation and by selection only.
Is
You
it?
can't just apply to go. I couldn't say I want to go to GBC college because I have to be personally selected and
Okay.
mandated.
All right.
And it's like 99% males of a certain age and then it's their stature in ISKCON. So where is that training future managers of ISKCON? It's not.
Well, if you were to be a future manager, probably you could get in, I would think. If you were like...
No, the age profile of it and the actual status of anybody going into it now is that you are usually well established in a position already in the management in ISKCON.
Maybe.
So
I don't know.
I'm talking about training for, I'm nearly 60, I'm talking about training the people who are going to come after I die in 10 years, and at the moment we're in a stone's throw up here, we've got like 4 or 5 serious temples going to the wall. And I'm asking, where's the management that's going to come in and inspire that, or train management to take heed? But we're already there. We're a done deal. The temples are there. Why not train to maintain those and then build simultaneously new temples? It just seems that we have an insular mode of operation that
Well, you still need that. I think I can't answer that question because I don't know. But you need people to train. And so I would say off the top of my head, there may be either a lack of people to train or a lack of communication and polling or choosing from the ranks and files. Look, here I am, I want to be trained. Or a system for people to volunteer. I don't know how it works. I have no idea. I'm not involved. But definitely, if we can find people to be trained, and you could recommend them, maybe that'll happen. Or maybe the people that are being trained, someone may come over because there's a need for it. But it's better if they're trained from the ranks. I don't know. I don't follow that system. I'm not... when I think of management too, I get bored after a while. So it's not, it's not my forte. And I haven't managed in a while. I do think about it, but I can't speak for it. I don't know why. I have no idea how they're choosing. I mean, I know people that have gone. I know devotees that have gone to the college that don't hold any big positions. They were just Bhakti Vriksha leaders, and they took all the courses. So I don't know if it's that difficult to get in.
Of course, one aspect of this is like Varnashram, and by purification and more coming to the mode of goodness, that you will actually get natural managers. That people have that kind. You say you get bored, but there are people who don't get bored, who are actually really interested and inspired by that.
Yeah.
And then they'll actually become qualified.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think that's the idea of that college to find those people who have that nature. Because if you don't have that nature, you can get trained, but...
I was listening to Urmila at one point, and she has this point that ISKCON is seriously lacking in Kshatriyas. and they're all fighting on the internet.
Get them off the internet. But ISKCON, yeah, we're lacking Kshatriyas. Vaishyas also, we need. You know, you have land, you have people, manpower, you have good Vaishyas, all they think about is how to turn every blade of grass into money. You know, that's just how their brains are wired. So, you know the saying, the Prabhupada said the Sindhis, their business class in India, he said they can give them mud and they'll make money. They'll figure out how to sell mud. So you need those kinds of people also. Yeah.
Just another point, a different point I wanted to ask about was that you said that, you know, if there was a controversy when Prabhupada was on the planet, it was very quickly solved. You get a letter, and my realization over the last year and a half is that we wouldn't have half the controversies that we have at the moment if we read those letters, because we're just tuning the tune.
Well,
It's just a different named person, but you can say, oh, I know, such and such is doing that now, and it's like Prabhupada saying, put a stop to it, or Prabhupada saying, yes, this is fine, I don't have a problem with it. I was thinking, you know, I went in one time in Vrindavan, I think, or it might have been LA, I saw that they have the Prabhupada Murti, and they put one of Prabhupada's letters with the same date, but just a different year.
Yeah.
I thought we should do that here.
That'd be nice.
You know?
Or you can read after the morning program, or but there is a problem with that, because you and I can argue about what Prabhupada meant in that letters, or there's some kind of, some devotees have these like global universal arguments that you can apply to anything.
Yeah.
Well, that was, you know, because we were immature or because the movement was new. Things are different. That's because we wanted to do that, so Prabhupada let us do that. You know, some people throw that argument at practically everything that they don't agree with. So you have that problem. So
Prabhupada just wanted to encourage us. That kind of an argument you're saying.
Encourage us, or we weren't ready for anything else, or that was pre-Varnashram. But so I don't want to invalidate what you're saying, because we need to know what Prabhupada wanted. But if a person is determined to make a point, it really doesn't matter what you say to them, because they'll just say that was for that era, but now we're in a different era. You know, the Prabhupada wanted Varnashram, we haven't done it. That was, you know, because you can make arguments and say Prabhupada doesn't want Varnashram, he just wants Sankirtan. Because for up till 1974, that's all he said. He didn't talk about Varnashram. So it was just an observation that I had, you know, because after Prabhupada left, the controversies, they started very quickly. Because my personal realization and observance was, at least for me, and I think for many of us, we had ideas, we had opinions, but we knew if we were vocal about it and it got back to Prabhupada, that was a moment of truth. And we could be embarrassed in front of the whole society. Because if you were really pushing something and it was bothering people, it would get back to Prabhupada and he would make his comment on it. For example, some devotees were preaching that we need 5 classes a day. That we need to have a class in every one of Prabhupada's books. So at that time, we had five main books. And everywhere they were going, 5 classes a day, we need to read Prabhupada's books, this is what he wants. And so that meant that after breakfast, there would be 1 or 2 classes, and we would go out in Sankirtan, like up to maybe 2 hours later. And maybe an extra class at night, so we'd come back earlier. So after, you know, this was starting to be instituted, because these senior sannyasis, who had been devotees for 3 years, that was senior at that time, 1972. And they were sannyasis, and, you know, at 72, how many sannyasis were there? Like 8? So, you know, you're one amongst 8 people. You have a lot of weight. And so it came back to Prabhupada, you know, Sankirtan's going down because we're having these extra classes. And I think Prabhupada said, who is that nonsense that's saying you should have 5? Because Prabhupada never said it. So he just stopped. It was over. You know, they were preaching like heavy. We need this. These are the reasons. like that, convincing everybody. As soon as it got back to Prabhupada, he makes a statement. So if you push something, it's definitely that's going to upset someone. It's going to get to Prabhupada, and then it's going to be news to the movement, and you're going to be embarrassed like anything, because even though Prabhupada didn't know it was you, he clarifies it. So my observation was a lot of devotees during Prabhupada's time were very careful about being too vocal about anything, unless they were 100% sure Prabhupada would approve it. Because many devotees just got put down, like that GBC resolution I was saying. And the removing of Tamal Krishna Maharaj from the Radha Damodar, like drastic measures, which were quite embarrassing. But after Prabhupada left, I noticed within the first year, I would say, by the first year, it started happening. You have all these ideas in your head about ISKCON, and you don't want to say anything because you're afraid Prabhupada's here and you'll get corrected or severely chastised and embarrassed. So I noticed after, the controversy started coming, ISKCON, this and that, and there was nobody to correct you on that level. And so controversies developed and people started taking sides and this and that. So it wasn't like that when Prabhupada was here. Come up, knock down. You've all heard the story about the Gopi Baba Club, this group of devotees. They're reading about the gopis every day. And so it just comes up to Prabhupada. He hears it. He makes his comment. It was finished. It was, it was probably like 10 minutes. And that whole thing was finished. That a potential sahajism finished in 10 minutes. Isn't that amazing? Should we wear a Western dress on Sankirtan? Should we not? Going back and forth. People arguing, yes, no, this and that. Prabhupada listens, Then, if you want to hear out what actually, I'll tell you the history of it, because I don't think anybody knows. The history of wearing Western dress was, the devotees, everybody went out in dhoti or sari, and we used to go downtowns, because at least in America, downtowns were the main shopping area. But they started shifting into the suburbs, into malls. So we started going to malls, and then we were getting kicked out because it was private property, and we're obviously quite noticeable. So the devotees thought, well, if we wear regular clothes, they won't notice us. So I said, okay, let's try that. They got wigs, regular clothes, and they went out, and they could stay in the mall sometimes all day. The security wouldn't notice them. They go, this is good. But as a side benefit, they realized that two things. I could stop people that wouldn't stop before, because when they see me in a dhoti or sari, they know what I want. And some people feel awkward talking to a person with tilak and a shaved head. So they were doing more books. So that created a controversy because it seemed like a compromise. And Prabhupada was very, very concerned that his disciples, who were previously hippies, wouldn't become hippies again. He was very concerned. You'll see many times he talks about that. So now they're wearing wigs. So wigs means hair. Hippie means hair. Prabhupada had to shave our head every 2 weeks. If you had hair more than 2 weeks, he's like, what's up? Why? If you're a brahmachari. So this controversy was going on, and Prabhupada was thinking, they're just going back to their hippie. They want to wear wigs, long hair, and dress up. And so he said, I don't think it's good. And so the head of the BBT said, Prabhupada, they're wearing like short wigs, they look like gentlemen. They're not doing it because they want hair. It's better for book distribution. So Prabhupada said, And then this was the clincher. He said, Prabhupada, if you don't want us to wear Western dress, that's fine, but in my estimation, it'll decrease book distribution 50%. Prabhupada said, then wear Western dress. That was the clincher. It will increase book distribution. And then he was certain that it wouldn't disturb the devotees and they weren't becoming hippies. So, it went back and forth, but it didn't take very long, and then that was it. Definitive edition. But it didn't end there. I and a group of devotees thought it was a compromise, that we could actually do as many books in dhotis as we could in Western dress. And we thought, people should see us in dhotis, it's better. So, Christmas Marathon 1973, we went out in dhotis. And we were revolutionary missionaries because we wanted to prove to ISKCON you can wear a dhoti and distribute as many books. And this Western dress is all a compromise. And we did it, and we distributed as many books. So then we wrote Prabhupada. And we thought Prabhupada's going to say, aha, I knew it. Western dress is a compromise. We'll tell the movement you don't need it. So we got an amazing reply from Prabhupada. And it seemed that Prabhupada knew our mentality. Because we were waiting for the reply, yes, you have discovered you were the real Sankirtan devotees. And Prabhupada said, if you feel more comfortable in a dhoti or sari, you can wear that. That was his reply. Like, who would imagine you'd get that reply? So, that was a potential controversy there, wasn't it? This is all Maya, you're wearing Western dress. And so Prabhupada, he just smoothed it out, and it ended right there in one letter. We felt very humbled because we understood, Prabhupada understood us. And it was finished. I wanted to start a rock and roll band. I thought that would be great for preaching. Prabhupada said, no, don't do it. I said, Prabhupada, we could be famous. No, you're not going to be famous. You made Krishna famous, and you like music? Yeah, that's fine. Do a nice kirtan in the temple. So, it was it. It was like, okay, my rock and roll career ended, in one sentence. It was like that. It was just, but we should have rock and roll bands. We could become famous, and we could distribute so many books. We'll make so much money. And we're dreaming, we're seeing, turning the island into a palace. All the money we're going to make from rock and roll band. And Prabhupada's like, grow up, you fool. That's never going to happen. That's basically what he said. You're dreaming. It's never going to happen. So, he would end things like that. Or like I told the story the other day, I think last night, that we wanted to get a farm. We thought, farm, this is it. You have to have farms, Varnashram, this is it. The movement's in Maya, this is the next phase, it's in that. And at one point I said, Prabhupada, it's getting in the way of Sankirtan. Okay, forget it. Forget the farm. It was like one letter, it's finished. So, obviously things were easier that way. Yes, it made it obviously easier. And after Prabhupada left, there's so much controversy. And so I think that's a big challenge for us to be able to see things, to be reasonable and see things. Or like you say, understand Prabhupada's letters. But
there are letters there that are like, the way they're sectioned out is you can have like, the categories are there. So when Prabhupada seemingly comes from a different angle, 3 letters are put together.
Yeah.
So it's nicely done.
Yeah. Well, obviously you understand he's dealing with individuals.
Yeah.
I asked Prabhupada for sannyas, and Prabhupada's secretary told, Prabhupada dictates the letters.
Yeah.
And so Prabhupada's secretary told me that Prabhupada was getting many sannyas letters. So he would open the letter, and basically he would say to Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, another sannyas letter. That's what he would say. That's what he told me. He said, Prabhupada, another sannyas. And Prabhupada, from who? He'd say, so-and-so. Say, okay. And he'd just say, okay. And he told me when Prabhupada, I wrote my letter, and he said, from who? Mahatma Das. And he said, Prabhupada said, tell him he's a nonsense. So, Prabhupada knew that at 22, I wasn't, 22 with a 1-year-old, or 23 with a 1-year-old son, I was not a candidate for sannyas. And that it was a nonsensical proposal. And so that ended it. And I tried it once more a year later, because I was so frustrated in that relationship. I tried it again, and he said, okay, you can be Vanapras, which basically meant you don't have any more kids. But he didn't give me sannyas. So it just made things so simple. You don't have to talk to your God, but yeah, you should do it. Your wife is in Maya, just leave her. None of that. It's just one letter, one sentence. It's problem solved. So obviously that makes things easier. The whole where do we fall from controversy, that came to Prabhupada. And even though he answered it, it's still a controversy, which is my point. That he does answer it, but it still, for some, is a controversy. Or how do you say? Controversy? Controversy.
And when you think, what is controversy? how do you say it? What is it? It's like it's an argument, so nobody wins an argument.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada has this example of the scissors, the guy who was thrown into the river, and it's a scissors argument. So nobody wins an argument, so that's what it is, that's what's going on. It's just argument.
And the thing that you realize by being in ISKCON long enough is that we're all human and we're acting out our human frailties when we don't get along. And it's not, a lot of times you're arguing so-called philosophically, but from my perspective, it's not a philosophical argument. It's just an argument of two people that can't see other person's points of view and they don't want to, and that's their nature. Have you noticed that? Sometimes it's not about the philosophy, it's about this nature that I don't like you and I don't like anything you say. And so whatever you say, I'm going to defeat it.
And then that ends up in a battle.
Yeah. And so in the name of philosophy, we degrading in our relationships.
Yeah.
And so that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, because one person feels that he's doing something right. He's got a kind of a self-righteous motive, and he thinks he's right, but actually although even he may be right on a certain level, but on another level he's wrong. Because you can actually be right and be wrong at the same time. And you can be more wrong than, on another level than right.
Well, yeah, you can be right and everyone in the temple leaves.
Yeah.
So, great.
You can be right, but go about it the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
The saying, operation was a success and the patient died.
Mm.
So, a lot of the questions and discussions that I have in classes are really it could be discussions with any group of people. It's relevant to all. It's not necessarily relevant to devotees. It's relevant to just people getting along and the issues that all people have. And I think sometimes because we're devotees, we think we're transcendental and we don't realize that we have the same issues that other people do. We're not always so transcendental. In fact, sometimes we're very transcendental less. And it makes it worse when you're not transcendental and you think you are. Doesn't it? It's like salt on the wound. So
Coming up with the perfect answer, but imperfect parts. Because we're
imperfect
parts. We're imperfect, so we can't get the perfect answer if we're imperfect.
I'll tell you a really interesting story. It took place, must have been 1997 or 98. There was a meeting between some of the Ritviks, head of the Ritvik party, and some leading devotees in ISKCON in India. And ISKCON devotees were presenting their arguments in favor of living Diksha gurus, and then the Ritviks were presenting their argument. And I was living in Vrindavan, and I didn't really know what was going on, but I walked by the room, and the windows were open, and the door was open, and you could listen. So I listened. One argument, then another argument. And the first thought that came to my mind was, nobody's going to convince anybody of anything. It's just, ISKCON has their idea, the Ritviks have their idea, and that's what happened. And to me, the issue was, okay, I'm not going to convince you and you're not going to convince me, so what do we do? But the whole meeting was about trying to convince one another, and nobody convinced one another, so they were at loggerheads and there was no resolution. So I think that would have been an excellent way to mature. Okay, you this, me that, now what? How do we work with that? That's maturity, isn't it? But we tend to be more Siddhanta oriented. No, if my Siddhanta doesn't agree with your Siddhanta, then that's it. There's no working together. And in some cases that may be true, and in some cases maybe not. Yes.
I think in a lot of cases I just think of the fact of being a mother. I go back to the same example that, we find it much more easy to agree with somebody if we love them, if we have some affection for them.
That's true.
For a child, I can allow my child to display both of them to display their individuality easier than I could my friend. My friend, I would want her to think the same way as me.
Yeah.
That's why, what do you mean you think they were, well, I thought you were my friend, but I would never speak that way to one of my children, because, the relationship is much more intense, there's much more affection in that way. So I think it's hard because you want to develop relationships with devotees, especially if you're not very similar, and there's that barrier of you expecting them to agree with you or to even think like you. And it kind of stops you from going further in the relationship at the same time without having some kind of love or affection. You can't oversee it. It seems,
Love creates acceptance.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have to agree to have a friendship. I mean, you may choose not to have a friendship.
Agree to disagree.
There could be other things that you have in common. Like you like to cook together, or you like to do kirtan, or you like to discuss philosophy, but you disagree on something else. You want to hear a funny story? Well, Abraham Lincoln said, if I don't like somebody, I need to get to know him. He was one of the, last great, at least presidents who knew how to think and was very highly moral. And so I had that experience. There's one devotee, and he does a lot of posting on the internet. And practically everything he posts makes my head boil. How can you say that? That's so wrong. Prabhupada never said that. And sometimes we get into a little tuffle, and there's no use in talking because he's a one-trick pony. And just whatever I say, he'll say the same thing. And he can't always back it up with Prabhupada, but he backs it up kind of quoting this and quoting that, which doesn't support, in my mind, what he's saying, but in his mind it does. So I was in another country once, and all of a sudden, there he was. He showed up, right? And in that country, they have every year a boat festival, which means you rent boats, and one boat has the deities, and then there's boats around the deities, and all the devotees get on the boat and have kirtan. So each boat has its own kirtan, but you follow the deities. So I got on my boat, and all of a sudden, I looked to my right, and who's sitting next to me on my boat? Who had just gone on after me? There he is. Public enemy number one. And we were talking and joking, and Abraham Lincoln was right. On another level, he's a really nice person, and he was helping us, and we had to do things, and we went back, and he had his Skype with his son. He goes to my son, talk to my son, so we're having a good time. And in fact, we both were having a good time because we were talking about Ritviks, and we were both giving arguments against Ritviks, so we were on the same side. So I think that's important to realize, because sometimes relationships can break just because I don't agree with you on some issue, women guru, or Varnashram versus Sankirtan, or traditional versus liberal, Krishna West, East, North, South, whatever. And that's unfortunate. And to me, it's kind of, it's like a dharmic war, You don't believe in dharma, therefore, I oppose you. And obviously it's not what Prabhupada wanted. So it was a good experience for me. We had a good time. And we hung out and we took prasadam together.
It's like that in a relationship. There may be certain areas that you just don't go there. Because it's going to create an argument or a controversy. Yeah. So you just don't actually, you just leave it out.
Yeah. And then the point is, if you don't like the argument, there's a tendency not to like the person who made the argument. And then you just, oh, he's a whatever.
Yeah.
And that person, he just posted something recently on the internet, which I thought was like, really, really not representing Prabhupada. But because I know him and I like him as a person, I could separate that from him, and I think that's really important. Otherwise, you don't like what I say, you don't like me. But I might be a nice guy, and you could like me. So.
And there's that letter from Prabhupada about, this is not utopia.
Yeah.
Because when everyone is expecting a perfect society and everyone in it to be perfect, that creates a lot of problems.
Everyone agreeing, So, well, one of the realizations I have is that if someone has a certain opinion and you understand that person, you can understand better why they think that way. It's just that, they have a certain angle or a certain background, a certain personality, and it comes out often in how they understand Prabhupada. But then if you understand that, then it makes sense. Like this person, who I think is not representing Prabhupada, he lives in India, he's been there a long time, and he's definitely representing what he believes to be Vedic culture. And I understand that. And we once got in an argument, and he said, you can't understand what I'm saying unless you live in India. And I had been living in India for like 5 years. So I told him, actually I do live in India, and he liked that I was, it made it better. But I could understand him. He's been there most of his life, and he loves it and everything about it. So I think that's important also, to understand why people see things in a certain way. And sympathize with it even if you disagree. You agree? You don't agree with me, I won't love you.
That's utopia. Everyone has to agree with everybody.
So Prabhupada was saying in that letter, I think didn't he say in that letter that diversity is good?
Yeah, because it's a sign of individuality. Individual expression. He was pointing out we're not impersonalists.
So it's good we're different.
Personalism.
So it's good we're different, and the challenge is how to work everything out. You want to do an amazing exercise? We did this 2 years ago in Mayapur. There was a meeting with GBCs, sannyasis, and gurus. And the Unity and Diversity letter was read. All the devotees read it. There was a little bit of discussion, just a few minutes. And then we partnered up with another person and we discussed it for an hour and a half, or an hour and 15 minutes. We discussed that letter. That was one of the most amazing experiences we all had, discussing that letter with another person. What does this mean? And it sounds like it wouldn't be very profound, just discussing that letter with another person. It's amazing. That may be something you may want to do as a community sometime. Read the letter 3 times, make a few comments, partner up with someone. What does this mean to you? Because it's all about unity and diversity, and you get all these realizations about unity and diversity, which helps us get that you maybe didn't have previously, and it's so helpful in being able to work with other people. I was actually shocked at what the realizations I got by doing that exercise. And I had read that letter many times.
I suppose I was thinking as well the other day when you were giving class, you made a comment. I don't know if I can quote exactly what you said. It was something along the score that, it's important to know not just the books that Prabhupada has, given us and everything in the philosophy, but to know Prabhupada as a person.
Yeah.
And then we were discussing these books that have come out lately as well, which, are really, written by devotees who had very personal relationships with Prabhupada, maybe Yamuna, Shamasundar, people like that. And I was thinking, when we think of Krishna, we think of the absolute truth, presenting Krishna as, he's the creator, he's also in Vrindavan, he's the lover of Radharani, and creating the whole aspect of him absolutely from all aspects. And of course, different devotees are going to be attracted to different aspects of Krishna and different services and things like that, and that's normal. And the same thing is going to happen with Prabhupada, that there are certain devotees that are like, will preach to you that Prabhupada was really into this and that's why it's the best and to do like that. And I think that's only natural. If you ask a child even, different children in the same family, what is it you love about your father, they'll all probably give you different aspects as well. So that's normal. And it's healthy. But I think when it crosses the line, for me anyway, is when somebody presents Prabhupada in a certain aspect and then another devotee will present another aspect or maybe an experience and say, no, it's just going to come from my angle and that's just the way it is. Because, surely, just as we're entitled to speak Krishna completely as he is, we're entitled to have Prabhupada as he is, And I think it's very important that you have that balance that, naturally when you get a temple president or a manager, they're attracted to a particular mood and they're going to attract certain personalities that will come within that zone and preach. But I think it's great to have the variety, because then, everybody is influenced in different aspects of Krishna consciousness, and the same with Prabhupada. There's so many devotees that could tell you Prabhupada, and some people who are not even devotees.
You want to hear a story about this?
Yeah, interesting.
This is an interesting story. In Los Angeles, they developed a studio called Golden Avatar, and they were responsible for all the recordings of Prabhupada, at least from maybe 1970. You see they had the tape recorder in the morning walks, if you ever see morning walks. They were responsible for that, and then producing and distributing. And they also developed a recording studio, so they could record music. And so they recorded an album called Change of Heart. Did you ever have that album here? Yeah. So I think they once played it in the temple, and immediately, Maya, turn it off. It was just, everybody thought, this is Maya rock and roll. And it came to Prabhupada because he was writing the songs himself. It wasn't like he was just singing translations of Acharya songs. He was writing them. And it came to Prabhupada that such and such is writing his own songs. That's like, you don't write songs. You're not an Acharya. That was kind of the understanding. So I was in class. You don't exactly know what they were feeding Prabhupada. But when Prabhupada, he made a statement, he said, unless you're a liberated soul, you can't write a song. Which basically meant they were saying he's making up his own ideas about, they're not bona fide. It's probably what they told him. So then Prabhupada made that statement. So that statement taken at face value means you can't write a song, you can't write a poem. You got to be really careful about writing anything if you're not an Acharya. So anyway, Prabhupada went to the studio to record. And after he recorded, he said, Prabhupada, can we play you what Mangalananda's doing? Because Prabhupada heard that he's creating his own songs, right? So they played, Prabhupada listened. And the devotee tells the story, that Prabhupada liked it. He listened to the words and he said, oh, this is all bona fide. This is all fine. And he said, but Prabhupada, the devotees are saying this and that. And Prabhupada said, the cows may move. We have the dogs may bark, the caravan may pass. This time he said the cows may move, but you just have to pass. In other words, they may complain, but don't worry. So I think Prabhupada was saying, if you do the right thing and you know it's right, you're sincere, you can support that it's right. If someone doesn't agree, just be tolerant.
And this has a lot to do with inspiration as well, because when somebody can express from their own heart, their own individual Krishna consciousness, that's inspiration.
Yeah.
That person is inspired because he's understanding his personal relationship with Krishna, and that's going to come through everywhere else.
Yeah.
So that's a part of that whole unity and diversity understanding.
But where it gets complicated is when you have projects that need people to do certain things. And what's interesting though, I don't know if you're aware of this, but one time Prabhupada said, it's not so much about the preaching, it's about the service, that we all need to be engaged in doing something. So he saw preaching, or all the service we do, as something we needed for ourselves. And then you may have heard that Prabhupada say that we don't need all these big buildings, but I have so many big leaders, and they, it's like they're hungry for service. They want big projects. So, it's not a common theme, but he did say it a few times. That,
because basically, what are we trying to do? We're trying to chant Hare Krishna, have kirtan. It's very simple what we're trying to do.
Trying to stay above water while we're doing it.
Why is it everything's so complicated? We're just trying to chant Hare Krishna, have kirtan, and talk about Krishna together. And yet we have...
Well, when we have these big projects, that often gets lost. Like, we have the goals, and then we lose sight of that. Whereas actually, if you study the history, Prabhupada didn't really want to have temples. That wasn't his plan. It was books. But he said, well, so many people were coming, we needed a place.
Sometimes they said we don't want any more grotesque projects. Well,
I was just with my godbrother, and he was saying he had a mantra like, we're serving walls instead of serving devotees. Because we have so many projects that were big projects that are difficult to maintain. We didn't know they would be difficult to maintain.
Now we know.
And so now we know for the future, when we do a project, how to prioritize. Why are we doing this? Well, one of the reasons we're doing it is for ourselves, that we have service, that we can be inspired. And being able to do what inspires us is important, for sure. But in certain projects, you can't do that because it's not what's needed. And then, people may feel bad that you want to do something. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, generally, yeah. As long as it's within the mission and, acceptable. There were some situations where devotees wanted to make movies, and Prabhupada said, no, you don't. But with Yadavar, he encouraged him because he was already a movie maker. But if you, like with me, don't try to be a rock star with George Harrison, do music. You already are. So when one devotee said, we could do movies, Prabhupada said, there's so many people who do movies, you don't have to do it. But if you're already a professional, and that's what you do, then he would encourage you. So those, there are some situations where a person, at least the way I saw it, they had an important position and Prabhupada didn't want them to do anything else. They say, I just want to, do painting. Painting is good, we need artists. But if that person was empowered to produce books and manage the BBT, he wouldn't want them to do painting. So you have those situations.
That's like Krishna says, to follow another's path is dangerous.
Yeah. But sometimes it was their path, and Prabhupada didn't want it.
Sorry.
Because that's the price you pay when you get up in the higher echelon sometimes. Prabhupada wants you to do certain things. But my observation is that everyone, water seeks its own level, and everyone finds that. And even if you're a manager, like Radhanath Swami is a GBC, but he doesn't, and Gopal Krishna Maharaj is a GBC, but they are different persons. So they operate differently. Gopal Krishna Maharaj is a very good manager. And so he functions on that level. Radhanath Swami is inspirational. He functions on that level.
Yeah, he has managers. He's not.
Yeah.
He says himself he's not a manager, but he has managers.
So that because that's his nature, and Gopal Krishna Maharaj's nature is to manage, so he has managers also, but he's more on top of it because it's natural. It's not planned out on paper. That's just how he is. And sometimes there was talk that GBC sannyasis shouldn't be managers, but some of them are really good managers, and that's what they do. And even if you take them away from managing, they'll still manage because that's what they think about, because that's who they are. I have a friend. He's a businessman, and he says all I think about is how to make money. He said I can't stop my mind from thinking about how to make money, and he said I don't even need money.
Well, we need money.
and I'm sitting there thinking, I need money also. Why don't you give me some ideas? Or better yet, just give me some money. You have all the ideas. You can make more. So, but he told me that. He said, I have to stop myself from thinking. And he said, and all these ideas are all really good ideas, and they would all work. So, yeah, so if that person were a temple president, you can probably, there would be lots of restaurants, catering, they would be going out to rock festivals doing prasadam, because he's a businessman, that's what they would do. And the temple would have a lot of money. Every temple, or many temples that I've been part of, they were quite wealthy when the temple president was a Vaishya. Of course, that's just how they thought. They always thought how you could turn things into money. So you can't remove that nature from the individual.
I was listening to Krishna book today, and at one point it was saying that how the Vaishya, Kshatriyas, Brahmins, and Sudras, that there's no in the Vedic situation, there's no competition between them.
Yeah.
They're not in competition with each other. So they're cooperating. So there's two things. They're not in competition, and they are cooperating. There's this is Kali Yuga, where there's competition is always there.
Yeah. Well, we also have the problem that if I told you you were Shudra, you'd probably hate me for the rest of your life. You say, what do you mean I'm Shudra? And I say, well, you work for a company. That's the definition of Sudra. So Sudra has a bad name, but like 95% of the population works for somebody. And then whatever percentage owns their own business, technically they're Vaishyas. And then if you don't work for anybody and you're not running a business and you're teaching, you're a Brahmin. So that's also a consideration. Like, and how to make it work, but now you feel bad because I called you a Shudra. But that's just the description. That's what it is.
But actually, anyone who's working according to their nature will actually be happy and satisfied.
Yeah.
If they're properly situated. And they don't really care what somebody else.
And if they understand that, because people who work for other people generally are more comfortable doing that than having their own business. So then if they understood, that's just a definition of Shudra, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. It's just, you have that mentality. Do you want to run a business? No, I don't. Oh, okay, that's fine. Shudra is a dirty word, right? In the Hare Krishna movement.
Well, what if, you're in a devotee community and I can say from my experience, I won't say names, and they designate you a task based according to your body outlook. Like this guy has to work in the kitchen or sweep the floors because he's African, whatever. Mm-hmm. But you yourself, that you're intellectual, you like books, you've been reading a lot.
Yeah.
But they stamp that on you for a long time. Like, how do you deal with that?
How do you deal with it? Well,
at the end of the day, it's like
I've cleaned many pots and many bathrooms in my devotional days, which is usually where everyone starts out.
Yeah.
So, but how do you deal with it? And they say, well, I've been cleaning bathrooms and pots for 6 months. Can I move up now?
No, I don't
Can I
mean
graduate?
I mean that I still clean bathroom and stuff. I'm just saying, when it becomes a stereotype towards, because of a certain skin color or certain look, like I remember devotees who are from maybe Portugal or Spain, they were known as hard workers.
Yeah.
And whenever they came to the altar, they were made to do certain tasks every time, and I was wondering, okay, so Portuguese and Spanish are, the Guardian Dead.
Well, there may be truth to it also.
Maybe,
Maybe they're skilled or they have nature for farming or whatever. But in the perfect world, you would be engaged according to your nature. But if you're living in an ashram as a brahmachari, then you also have to do whatever you're asked. So that's what it means to be a brahmachari. It's kind of like basic training in the military. And then, so the president, it's kind of like, if I'm the president and you do whatever I ask, then at a certain point I'll say, what do you want to do? Because you've passed the test, you surrendered. So, okay, what do you want to do? So I want to distribute books. Okay, let's organize that for you. So that's part of, being a brahmachari. So much so that in traditional brahmacharya, you wouldn't even eat if the guru didn't call you for lunch. You would fast. It's just menial. So you learn to be a menial servant. So that's why it's there, at least to some point. But every good leader will try to understand what will inspire you and what's your nature and engage you at some point. But he wants to see, will you do anything? And then, okay, if you do anything, I'm happy to engage you in what you want to do at a certain point.
I think what I'm trying to point out is, I read from this book by not the late, but he left his body, Punachandra Goswami Maharaj.
Oh yeah.
The unspoken obstacles of bhakti.
Yeah.
He talks about it a lot, that sometimes devotees who are inclined for certain things, when you come to the temple environment, they can get it wrong for you, and then you can kind of ruin your inspirational mood.
You can communicate to them also what your nature, what you believe your nature to be, and how you want to be engaged.
I think it's sad that we have such a problem, if we're by nature Sudra, or when you think that where we come from, from the letter families, 95% of the movement, and actually Sudra is elevated in comparison to Malacha, because at least he was in the Varnashram system.
Yeah.
The legs had a good job, where we're so elevated now that we don't want to think, of our background. It's a symptom that we, maybe we need to think more about where we've actually come from.
Yeah, and it's also, in addition to that, it's also your occupation.
Yeah.
It's not, your occupation by nature, so it's not that you can't go on the altar because you work for Microsoft or something.
Yeah.
So,
but can you, for instance, like you said something about Mlacha and Yavan, like for instance, if you are designated as a Mlacha, but you have a Vana for a Brahminical inclination, like, so what is that? Because in Kali Yuga, basically everything is mixed up from what.
once you become Krishna conscious, then you're not to be seen. You're not to be seen that way anymore. Not even seen as within any caste. You're transcendental. If you see a Vaishnava as part of the caste system, then that's offensive or incorrect. So that's Lord Chaitanya's mercy.
And sometimes I think, although I don't disagree with Varnashram, it makes perfect sense to me, but sometimes I think I can't relate to it very much when we see, we see devotees who have gone back to Godhead, that take Jainanda Prabhu for example, and we don't know, Prabhupada wrote that letter and he said he was in separation from him and things, and he didn't actually say in the letter that he had gone back to Godhead. I think Prabhupada described it that for sure you were assured a good destination.
Yeah.
But there was a devotee, Prabhupada would let him give up his job as a taxi driver, and said, once you offer that money to Krishna, then your job has become purified, because Krishna consciousness is higher than that. And if we look at the Varnas, they're all in particular modes, and we're supposed to transcend the modes in Krishna consciousness. So we need to again go back, and Prabhupada was emphasizing Varnashram. There's no doubt about that. It's there. If you study at all Prabhupada's books, you will see it. That Prabhupada, but in what aspect? He also said we should establish Varnashram, but at the same time he told us to transcend the modes. It's over and over and over again. Prabhupada will say, in his books, the devotees would ask sometimes about Varnas and whatever, and Prabhupada would say, chant Hare Krishna, and say very sincerely. In Krishna consciousness is above all that. So it seems like maybe it's a pre-programmed part of me that thinks Varnashram kind of designates you a particular status. And I think that status, Prabhupada's vision was that we could go beyond that,
Ultimately, yeah. But when he changed his mind, there were two reasons. One, he said, everyone's not going to chant Hare Krishna. So if they're not going to do that, how do we get them? So that was one of his reasons.
So he was talking about non-devotees when he talked about Vaishyas, say Indian business people, engaging them so they would have a particular varna, but not necessarily be engaged in the direct process of Krishna consciousness.
If they weren't ready for it.
Right.
But then the devotee said, so it's not for us. So at one point he said, no, it's not for us.
Yeah.
But later he said, it is, because some of you you're not really capable of being Vaishnavas at this point. So some of us have to go through it. So he made both points.
So how to find the balance is very difficult.
So, 16 rounds, 4 regular principles, and but before Prabhupada established Varnashram, we had Brahmachari, Grihastha, Varnaprast, and eventually Sannyas. So the ashrams were established. And then if you look within our organization, actually the Varnas are there. So in some sense...
the ashrams were established, but we did have a lot of people who didn't go through the ashrams and then prematurely left. They just wanted to jump, as you were explaining there, to sannyas, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
So they
so
were...
training.
Yeah,
which we still need. But the point was, it wasn't that it was completely, he didn't totally absolve Varnashram.
No.
And he wanted us to live Brahminically. So, we were teachers, priests, bathe twice a day, rising early, all these things.
Yeah. The other point is that in Kali Yuga, a lot of us, if we fall into any varna, we seem to fall into all of them. I see it for myself. I like to preach. At the same time, I like deity worship. At the same time, there's a bit of a Vaishya. I love to, the exchange of somebody giving the Lakshmi for the book is very enlivening. So you can see the mix is there, and pretty much every devotee that I know would be a mix.
Yeah, because that's symptomatic of Kali Yuga for many people.
Yeah.
That's the other side of the equation. Chant Hare Krishna, because everything is mixed up.
And then if you establish Varnashram Dharma, in some situations, and say the husband is a Brahmin but the wife is a Vaishya, or the wife is a Vaishya and the husband's a Varna, or vice versa, it's kind of, how to understand it, the marriages, it's not the way it was traditionally in India, because there would be Brahminical families that would marry their daughters to another Brahmin boy or girl.
Because the goal is to make it work in Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada never did the astrology of any devotees that he married.
Yeah.
He never did the astrology of devotees he was initiated. So he had a lot of faith. He had a lot of faith in the holy name.
Yeah. So, but how would it work then? I'm just trying to adjust to my head.
We had
an area where we said the Brahmins live here and the Vaishyas live here, and then you have a husband and wife, one's a Brahmin and the other is a Vaishya. How is it going to work?
You live with the Brahmins. Because her varna sometimes becomes altered by her husband.
But her husband doesn't get altered by hers.
Or he shouldn't marry somebody higher.
But I'm saying for marriages that are already established, like
They already came.
How would it?
Because
Yeah.
I think the broader concept is Prabhupada wanted us to set a living example of a community where we're all serving and put Krishna in the center. So that also is there. That's the overarching aim. So I think if you keep that in mind, these other things can be adjusted. It doesn't have to be perfectly. So we should probably end because it's time to end, which is a good reason to end, right? Do I have your permission to end? We can go on. The real answer is try to establish varnashram, and the answers will come. Because when you have to do it practically, you'll have to start figuring out and seeing how these things work. That's the real, as far as I can tell, that's the community that establishes it will be the most knowledgeable, because through trial and error they'll work it out. Okay, we're going to stop here. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Is that right? Class tomorrow morning? Okay. Srila